April 7, 1945. The dawn fog clung low over the winding banks of the Maas River near Roermond, Netherlands. You can hear the soft, relentless gurgle of water against shattered beams, the ghostly echo of steel twisted and wood splintered from the night's chaos. Smoke from artillery fire still hung in the air, stinging your eyes and filling your lungs with the acrid scent of gunpowder. On the German side, a lone Oberleutnant, Friedrich Keller, adjusted the brim of his helmet and squinted through binoculars at the blackened remnants of the bridge. His jaw tightened. The Allies had struck hard last night, demolishing the critical crossing with precision explosives. Without it, the German Ninth Army's retreat routes were severed. From his vantage point atop a crumbling embankment, Keller's radio crackled with intermittent reports. Fine, no bridge. Impossible. The words trailed off as a new report came in. Reconnaissance drones, or more accurately, the Allied jeeps skimming the roads below, were moving with a speed that seemed almost supernatural. He rubbed his eyes, thinking perhaps the morning mist was playing tricks. But the engineers were there unmistakably on the riverbank. American uniformed figures hauling what looked like stacks of steel panels, modular pieces, unlike anything the Wehrmacht had ever seen up close. Across the river, the Allies were working silently, almost like clockwork. Captain Samuel H. Turner of the 291st Engineer Combat Battalion crouched low as his squad assembled the first Bailey Bridge section. The steel panels gleamed faintly in the weak sunlight, bolts and pins sliding into place with precise efficiency. Turner barked orders with a calm authority, his voice carrying across the foggy expanse. Section 3, lift now. Watch your footing. Men clambered along the riverbank, some in ankle-deep mud, others balancing on wreckage, aligning beams that would within hours restore a vital artery of the front. The Germans, observing from across the water, couldn't comprehend it. A bridge, reconstructed in daylight under enemy eyes, while under constant artillery threat, seemed impossible. Keller muttered, Sie bauen wie Geister, wie Zauberer. They were building like ghosts, like sorcerers. Reports trickled in from other units. Bridge, rebuilt, overnight. His mind raced trying to calculate how such a feat could be achieved. His eyes tracked a young American private climbing onto the partially assembled span, sweat streaking, his dirt-smeared face, rifle slung across his back, hammering in the final pin. The river itself seemed to mirror the tension. Ripples ran outward from artillery splashes upstream, carrying debris that floated past the steel skeleton taking shape. The wind tugged at the canvas tents and tarpaulins, but Turner and his men were methodical, unaffected. Each modular panel, each lattice truss, slotted into place with a precision that made the Germans' eyes widen with disbelief. By mid-morning, the first section of the bridge was complete. Engineers ran the final inspections, checking alignment and securing braces. Turner wiped a streak of mud from his forehead, glanced toward the distant German positions, and allowed himself a small, wry smile. They're watching. Good. The men knew the psychological effect was nearly as important as the bridge itself. Every moment they worked, they reminded the enemy that speed, ingenuity, and determination could defy destruction. From across the river, Oberleutnant Keller's men whispered in disbelief. How is this possible in hours? The bridge was gone yesterday, and now it stands again? The sheer audacity of the Allies' engineering seemed to rewrite the rules of warfare itself. Keller's binoculars caught Turner signaling for the next section to be lifted. The rhythm of human effort synchronized with the hum of mechanized determination. And in that frozen, tension-filled moment, it was clear. The Germans were witnessing a marvel of military engineering that would haunt their reconnaissance reports for weeks to come. April 7, 1945, late morning. The fog had begun to lift, revealing the shattered landscape around the Maas. Burnt-out vehicles littered the fields, and the remnants of the destroyed bridge lay half-submerged, jagged timbers clawing at the river like skeletal hands. But the Allied engineers moved with an almost ritual precision, assembling what would soon be known as a Bailey Bridge, a modular, portable marvel of wartime engineering. Lieutenant Colonel James P. Harrington knelt beside the first span, tapping a measuring tape against the steel girders. "Make sure those cords are flush," he called. The men responded with nods, lifting panels that were deceptively heavy yet designed for quick assembly. Unlike traditional bridges that required days or even weeks to construct, the Bailey Bridge's genius lay in its modularity. Each section, composed of prefabricated panels, trusses, and pins, could be carried by a small crew, lifted into place with minimal machinery, and locked together to form a sturdy crossing. On the German side, Oberleutnant Keller's binoculars traced every motion. He noted the speed, a dozen men hoisting a panel lining it against the previous one, hammering pins in place, and already the framework began to resemble a proper bridge. His jaw tightened. This is no ordinary construction. They move like ants, coordinated, fearless. His men whispered nervously, scanning the nearby tree line for any sign of ambush, unable to reconcile the image of calm, efficient work with the destruction of the previous night. Turner's squad, now halfway across the riverbank, coordinated lifts with a system of pulleys and rollers. A 40-foot span was slid into place as if guided by invisible hands. The men shouted warnings, counted pins, and secured cross braces, while the river below churned with debris from the previous night's bombardment. The water splashed against the pontoons, but the Bailey Bridge, once aligned, held firm. Turner glanced at the clock, calculating speed. They were ahead of schedule by nearly 2 hours. The Germans reported back in disbelief. "The Americans, the bridge, it's alive again. They replace what we destroy faster than we can shoot." Keller frowned, trying to make sense of it. In his experience, destruction was permanent. Bridges fell, supply lines broke, and retreating units stalled. Yet here was evidence that Allied ingenuity, modular engineering, and relentless manpower could reverse devastation overnight. Each time a panel clicked into place, his heart sank a little further. By noon, the bridge had taken shape across nearly half the river. Turner ordered the teams to run a load test. A small jeep would cross first, inching along the new structure. Engineers held their breath, hands on pins, as the vehicle creaked and groaned under its weight. Then, with a soft vibration through the steel panels, it reached the other side. Turner exhaled, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's solid. Move the next section." Keller's reconnaissance officer scribbled furiously into a notebook, the lines almost illegible from shaking hands. "I've never seen such construction," he muttered. "Even with demolition expertise, there's no way to stop it, not in hours." The Oberleutnant's mind raced. How could a single battalion rebuild what would normally take engineers days? Every calculation, every prediction was obsolete in the face of this relentless efficiency. As the sun climbed higher, the bridge began to resemble a lifeline rather than a military feat, a taut ribbon connecting survival to victory. The engineers worked in unison, each man a cog in a machine finely tuned to resist chaos. Turner moved along the span, checking tension in the trusses, adjusting the bracing, eyes constantly scanning the far shore for threats. The Germans were observing, but the engineers were unbothered. For them, fear had no place, only precision mattered. By late afternoon, the bridge was nearly complete. The final panels were lifted, bolted, and locked. Men ran across to inspect alignment, testing for stability and strength. Turner allowed himself a brief smile. Knowing the Bailey Bridge had done more than reconnect banks, it had delivered a psychological blow. Across the river, Keller's squad stared, dumbfounded at a structure that had materialized overnight, seemingly from nowhere, and defied their expectations of what was possible on a battlefield. April 7, 1945, mid-afternoon. From his vantage point behind a shattered church steeple, Oberleutnant Friedrich Keller could barely tear his eyes away from the gleaming steel ribbon stretching across the Maas. He adjusted his binoculars again, disbelief etched across his face. Every detail was visible now: the latticework of trusses, the interlocking panels, and, most disconcerting of all, the movement of men across the bridge, already testing its strength with jeeps and trucks. "Unmöglich," Keller muttered under his breath. "Impossible." His radio crackled again, the report from another reconnaissance unit almost comical in its astonishment. "They are crossing already. Bridges rebuilt, In hours, repeat. Impossible. He frowned, tracing the silhouettes of engineers working tirelessly under the weak sun. Even the wind seemed hesitant, as if holding its breath at the audacity of the construction. On the other side, Captain Turner called for another load test. This time, a fully loaded ammunition truck rumbled across the bridge. The men flinched as the steel creaked and bent slightly under weight, then held firm. Turner's eyes scanned the German positions, imagining the shock radiating from the enemy lines. Every panel, every pin, every coordinated lift was a testament to months of practice, to the relentless training of men who had turned engineering into an art form under fire. Keller's men whispered among themselves, trying to rationalize what they were witnessing. How do they do it so fast? Their bridge. It's almost magical. One corporal, shaking, suggested artillery might destroy it, but Keller shook his head. The bridge's modular design meant that even if a section were damaged, the rest would remain intact and repairs could be executed in minutes. It was a living structure, adaptive and resilient, unlike anything the Germans had faced in their prior campaigns. Every movement of the engineers was scrutinized. Keller could see them adjusting the rollers, tightening bolts, guiding panels into place with practiced efficiency. Private First Class Eddie Marino, a young engineer from Ohio, stood at the midpoint, hammer in hand, sweat streaking his dirt-covered face. His eyes narrowed as he aligned the trusses, unaware of the awe he was inspiring across the river. For Keller, every swing of that hammer was an insult to months of meticulous German planning. As the afternoon wore on, the bridge became more than steel and pins. It became a symbol of inevitability. Supplies flowed across it, jeeps and half-tracks rolling steadily, their engines humming over the latticework. The Germans watched, frozen, as the tactical advantage they had assumed was theirs vanished with each passing moment. Keller scribbled frantic notes into his field book. Enemy engineers. Rebuild bridges. Overnight. Morale impact. Severe. The sheer audacity and speed were impossible to ignore. Back on the Allied side, Turner surveyed the Finnish span, his expression unreadable. The men were exhausted, mud-caked and sunburned, but the bridge stood flawless. "All right, boys," he called. "We've got a crossing. Let's secure the far bank and get supplies moving." Engineers began reinforcing the approaches, adding guardrails and placing sandbags at strategic points. Each action, though mundane to the builders, sent a clear message to the enemy. Nothing they destroyed could slow this advance. Keller lowered his binoculars, pressing the heels of his hands to his eyes. He could see the American flags flapping on nearby vehicles, the men moving with an uncanny precision. He could hear the laughter and shouted instructions carried faintly across the water, each sound amplifying the humiliation. For the Germans, it wasn't just a bridge. It was a demonstration of relentless ingenuity, a tactical rebuke that left them scrambling for explanations. The sun began to tilt low, casting long shadows across the river. The completed bridge gleamed like a silver promise against the fading light. Keller finally spoke, voice heavy with resignation. They are unstoppable when they decide to build. And in that moment across the river, both sides understood that the Bailey Bridge had done more than restore a crossing. It had redefined the very pace and psychology of modern April 7, 1945, early evening. Shadows stretched across the river as the sun dipped behind distant tree lines, painting the water in streaks of orange and gray. The Bailey Bridge now stood fully completed, a modular marvel spanning the turbulent current below. On the Allied side, Captain Turner walked along its length, boots crunching against the steel plates, the faint metallic echo accompanying his measured steps. He glanced toward the far bank, ensuring every pin and brace was secure. This wasn't just a bridge, it was a lifeline, a testament to hours of grueling labor, and a silent message to anyone watching. The Allies would not be stopped. Private Marino leaned against the guardrails, breathing heavily, his uniform caked in mud. He looked down at the water below, where remnants of the old bridge still floated, twisted and broken.
"Feels unreal," he murmured.
"We blew it up, and now this?" Sergeant Jenkins, wiping sweat and grime from his brow, slapped him on the shoulder. "That's war, kid. We build, they fall. Today we built faster." Turner's gaze swept the river's edge, noting the supply trucks lined up, engines ticking, ready to roll across the new structure. Across the river, Oberleutnant Keller crouched in the last rays of sunlight, binoculars trained on every movement. His unit had not dared fire upon the bridge yet. They understood the futility. Even artillery, he knew, would only shatter a few panels. Repairs would be immediate, unstoppable. The Germans murmured among themselves, sharing theories, none of which seemed plausible. They must have magic. Sorcery, whispered one corporal, half joking, half awed. Keller ignored the comment, his hands clenched over the binoculars. He was documenting everything, every procedure, every panel placement. The reports he would send back to headquarters would read like the accounts of a miracle. Yet this was reality. As twilight descended, the engineers lit small lamps along the bridge, their soft glow reflecting off the steel lattice. Turner ordered quiet. Any movement now needed to be careful, precise. A supply convoy rolled across under dim light, engines humming, tires clattering on the steel plates. Men carried ammunition, food and medical supplies, the bridge serving as both artery and shield. The Bailey Bridge had transformed from construction project into critical infrastructure, enabling mobility that could tip the scales in the Allied advance. Keller observed in tense silence. Noting the morale boost the bridge seemed to give the enemy. Each vehicle that crossed reinforced the notion of unstoppable momentum. We destroy. They rebuild. Faster than we can react, he muttered. His men scribbled observations, sketches, and measurements, struggling to rationalize the speed and efficiency of the engineers. Every shadow on the bridge seemed alive, every movement deliberate and coordinated. For the Germans, it was as if the bridge had a mind of its own, predicting their every countermeasure. Meanwhile, on the Allied side, Turner paced the midpoint of the bridge, ensuring that the night watch rotations were in place. Engineers were assigned to monitor the stability of the structure, check pins, and watch for any potential sabotage attempts. The Bailey Bridge's modular design meant that even if one section were compromised, repairs could be executed within minutes, a fact that weighed heavily on Keller's mind. Each lamp flicker, each whispered command, reminded him that the enemy had turned construction into a weapon. By late night, the river lay quiet. The only sounds the faint hum of distant engines and the soft lapping of water against the steel supports. The bridge itself seemed to stand sentinel, a silent guardian linking the Allies' positions. Across the river, Keller finally lowered his binoculars, exhausted and defeated by what he had witnessed. They do not sleep. They rebuild while we plan. He whispered, the words tinged with both fear and grudging respect. For the Germans, this bridge had become more than a crossing. It was proof that ingenuity, coordination, and relentless determination could render destruction temporary. Warfare. April 8, 1945, pre-dawn. Mist clung stubbornly to the river as the first pale light of morning revealed the full scope of the Bailey Bridge. The previous day's construction now appeared permanent, though in truth it was a temporary structure designed for speed, not longevity. Captain Turner walked alongside his men, checking the tension of trusses and reinforcing the approaches with sandbags. Each inspection was meticulous. Every pin, every panel, every brace mattered when the next wave of vehicles and supplies would cross. Downriver, German patrols reported back to Keller's unit. Their disbelief persisted. Entire convoys crossing, and it holds. One soldier whispered, peering through binoculars at a line of half-tracks and jeeps moving steadily over the steel lattice. Keller's mind raced. The bridge had done more than restore a crossing. It had redefined the tactical balance. Where destruction had been a weapon, engineering had become a counterstrike, erasing the Germans' advantage overnight. Allied planners understood the psychological and operational significance of the bridge. Lieutenant Colonel Harrington coordinated movements with nearby infantry units. Supplies, artillery, and armored vehicles could now flow across the Maas without delay. What had taken days to transport now moved in hours. Troops felt a surge of confidence with every crossing, the Bailey Bridge transforming from a temporary necessity into a symbol of unstoppable momentum. Engineers like Turner became unsung heroes, their labor invisible to most yet vital to the war effort. Meanwhile, Keller's reconnaissance officers scrawled frantic reports to higher command. They tried to rationalize the speed and precision, estimating the manpower involved, the equipment required, and the methods employed. None of it matched their experience. The bridge's modular construction, the efficiency of the engineers, and the speed at which the crossing became operational defied standard military calculations. One officer muttered, "They do not just rebuild bridges, they rebuild hope, faster than we can destroy it." Keller stared at the report sheets, pen hovering over notes. He knew his superiors would find it almost unbelievable. Bridges replaced overnight, convoys crossing under enemy observation, and not a single fatal flaw. By mid-morning, the bridge had already facilitated multiple battalion movements. Supplies flowed unimpeded. Wounded soldiers were evacuated efficiently, artillery repositioned with ease. Every movement underscored the tactical advantage granted by engineering ingenuity. Turner watched the convoy cross, noting the steady hum of engines over the steel plates. Each crossing was a rehearsal of precision, coordination, and trust in the structure's integrity. Across the river, Keller's men were demoralized. Their own commanders had emphasized bridge demolition as a means to stall the Allied advance. Yet here, time and again, the Germans' efforts were undone almost immediately. No matter how fast we destroy, Keller muttered to himself, they rebuild faster. Every gap we create, they close before we can act. The psychological effect was as potent as the physical advantage. German morale was quietly but steadily eroding, even among seasoned officers who had faced countless battlefields. By evening, the bridge had been reinforced further. Sandbags, wooden planks for traction, and guardrails transformed it into a functional and resilient crossing, ready to support the Allies' advance into German-held territory. Turner and his engineers collapsed near the far bank, exhausted yet satisfied. The Bailey Bridge had done more than span a river. It had delivered an unspoken message to the enemy. Destruction could be temporary, ingenuity permanent. And across the foggy banks of the Maas, Oberleutnant Keller realized that the battlefield had changed irrevocably. The Germans could no longer rely on demolition alone. The Allies' ability to rebuild, adapt, and strike back instantly was a force multiplier, unlike anything they had faced before. April 9, 1945. The Maas River gleamed under a pale spring sun, its calm surface belying the chaos that had surged along its banks only 2 days prior. The Bailey Bridge stood resolute, a lattice of steel trusses and pins linking banks that had been severed by explosives, smoke, and fire. Captain Turner paced along the length of the bridge, eyes scanning the horizon for signs of German activity. The men moved steadily behind him, reinforcing sections, clearing debris, and ensuring that the crossing remained fully operational. Each step on the steel plates resonated as a heartbeat of determination, human skill made manifest in engineering. Across the river, Oberleutnant Keller watched silently from a low ridge. The Germans had long relied on destruction to slow the enemy's advance, but this bridge had shattered their assumptions. Convoys flowed freely, infantry units surged forward, and artillery pieces repositioned with ease. Keller scribbled in his notebook with unsteady hands, the words forming a record of disbelief. The enemy rebuilds overnight. Efficiency beyond comprehension. Morale effect catastrophic. Bridges no longer obstacles but enablers. Every note was tinged with the reluctant acknowledgement of Allied ingenuity. Back on the bridge, Private Marino adjusted a brace, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. He glanced over at the water, where remnants of the previous night's wreckage floated silently downstream. "I can't believe we did this in a day," he muttered, and Sergeant Jenkins chuckled, slapping him on the back. "Believe it, kid. This is what keeps the Army moving. This is war at its finest, brains, brawn, and a little stubbornness." The men laughed softly, knowing the bridge was more than steel. It was proof that human resolve could outpace destruction itself. Turner allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The Bailey Bridge, modular and portable, was a simple idea, but its impact was profound. Its design allowed men to assemble spans rapidly, adapt to river widths, and maintain functionality under fire. Today, that combination of speed, coordination, and ingenuity had altered the battlefield. And it wasn't just physical. The bridge had sown doubt and hesitation in the German ranks, undermining their morale and reshaping their tactical calculations. Keller finally lowered his binoculars and exhaled slowly. He knew that the bridge represented a turning point, not in terms of geography alone, but in psychological warfare. The Germans' faith in destruction as a delaying tactic had been shattered, replaced by the uncomfortable knowledge that the Allies could respond almost instantaneously to any setback. He could see the men on the far bank unloading supplies, the engines of vehicles humming steadily, and he understood the depth of what had occurred. The bridge had become both a conduit for advance and a symbol of inevitability. As dusk fell, Turner's engineers began preparing for the night. Lamps were lit along the bridge and guard rotations were assigned. The structure itself seemed to hum with quiet triumph, each panel a testament to labor, ingenuity, and the unyielding rhythm of teamwork. Soldiers crossed in orderly succession, some carrying ammunition, others guiding vehicles, all aware of the bridge's dual role, as passage and as statement. Across the river, Keller's unit retreated to a temporary encampment, haunted by what they had witnessed. Reports would circulate, stories would be recounted, and the Bailey Bridge would earn its place in reconnaissance files as a phenomenon, an engineering marvel that defied expectation and reshaped tactics. But for the men who built it, it was simpler. A bridge was needed, and they had built it, fast, precise, unyielding. It would serve as a lifeline in the coming days, a conduit for victory, and a permanent reminder that in war, ingenuity could triumph over destruction, one panel at a time. As night enveloped the Maas, the bridge stood silently, spanning not just water but the gap between despair and hope, destruction and resilience. And somewhere in his notebook, Keller wrote what would become a refrain in German reports. They build overnight. We destroy. Yet they rebuild faster. The river flows, the bridge stands, and the enemy advances, undaunted.